So the pain was actually really hard for me to describe myself when I was first experiencing it. So that was actually probably one of the scariest moments.
Welcome back to Take a Pain Check. Today we're joined by Lisa Wang, an incoming fourth year Bachelor of Health Sciences student at Queen's University and one of our 2026 STEM Without Limits scholarship recipients. Lisa is living with juvenile axial spondyloarthritis and is involved in inflammatory arthritis research while pursuing a goal of becoming a clinician scientist in rheumatology. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Natasha. I'm so happy to be here. I'm super thankful to be receiving the scholarship from Take a Pain Check.
So, Lisa, for listeners that are meeting you for the first time, tell us a little bit about yourself and how your rheumatic disease first became part of your story.
For sure. So, for anyone who doesn't know, my name is Lisa Wang. And as Natasha mentioned, I'll be entering my fourth year of health sciences at Queen's, so in Kingston, Ontario. And I was diagnosed with juvenile ankylosing spondylitis when I was 14. And it was a very long diagnostic process, and it was filled with uncertainty because I remember the first time I went to the ER, they mentioned that it was probably a pulled muscle, and then they sent me home with some medications. But as the pain came back, I had to miss a few days of school, and it really kept me out of the things that I love doing on a day-to-day basis. So that was a very long diagnostic process, but eventually I did receive the diagnosis. And from then on, I started, having support in managing my disease and started getting more involved in giving back to the community.
You mentioned the pain becoming so severe that it started affecting your day-to-day life. I think sometimes people hear the word pain and they don't really appreciate what that actually means. What did pain actually look like for you on a daily basis? Can you be a little bit more specific?
So the pain was actually really hard for me to describe myself when I was first experiencing it because it was not something that if I touched it would hurt, or if I moved I would feel extra painful in that area. It was more so like even just staying still, you can feel like a sharp ache, specifically in my hip, like back of my hips and then my lower back. So it was like a sharp ache that was just constantly present. And then like one of my most vivid memories was just lying awake at night because I couldn't, fall asleep because I was in so much pain. Just lying there, you already feel so much. And also I remember like getting up was a huge struggle because I didn't know back then, but morning stiffness was really severe. It kind of kept me immobilized. And then throughout the day, there were a lot of days where I had to stay seated, but then at the same time, being seated for too long is not good for you. So then I borrowed crutches from a family friend. So I moved around with crutches. And then I also, at one point, I did use like a wheelchair to get around. So it was a bit debilitating.
So you've definitely been through a lot, and I can totally relate to you. I live with juvenile idiopathic arthritis, and that pain, whether it's constant or when you're moving, it's always there. And it comes in different ways and shapes and
Yeah.
forms, I'd say. And so it's so hard to
Mhm.
explain that to other people. How did that work for you? How did you have conversations with people about what you were going through?
I think I struggled a bit actually with having the conversations, especially with friends. Family members, it was much easier, but especially because I was diagnosed throughout high school. And then I think we were all coming back from like COVID around that time. So even the social interactions were a bit challenging because I remember I mentioned a few times to like some friends that I had arthritis and kind of what arthritis was. And then there were just a lot of assumptions, like, isn't this an old person's disease? Was something that I heard a lot of times. And honestly, that's something that I thought about myself first when I was diagnosed. But I think just the misconceptions about the disease and how it can affect younger people was something that I encountered in a lot of conversations.
So, as I was preparing for today's conversation, I learned that your older sister had also been diagnosed with the same rheumatic disease. So, I'm curious about how that influenced your family's experience and whether it sparked conversations about potential genetic components of the disease.
So my sister actually, she told me that she had been feeling the same sort of like joint pain throughout her young adulthood. She's much older than me, so she was already like working then, but she remembered back in her teenage years, she did experience a lot of like hip pain or she started limping. And then she never really got a diagnosis until a few months or maybe like half a year before I got mine. So while she was kind of navigating her own diagnosis and getting answers for that, I was also starting to experience like the symptoms myself. And as long as my diagnostic process was like she kind of helped with that because after she got her answer, she was like, "Hey, maybe you can get this sort of test and then see how that goes." So her story kind of informed mine, but she did go through a really long period of time where there were no answers and she was just struggling to the point where it was starting to affect her work.
So one thing I find super interesting about rheumatic diseases is that two people can have completely different days and nobody around them necessarily knows.
Yeah, I think that because it's an invisible illness that you can never really know what's going on, what that person is experiencing themselves. And I even see that between myself and my sister nowadays, where sometimes I still have like flares, but in a bit more stable situation. She's actually pregnant, so she started having a few more flares actually because of the weight that she has to bear. So hearing her having that joint pain in specifically her back actually was kind of sad to hear. And she can't be taking like NSAIDs or anything because that's like harmful for the pregnancy. But it's just comes to show how differently people experience rheumatic diseases and how different symptoms can look like at different stages in your life as well.
I think there's always some expectations that you set for yourself and then your family also sets for you, but I'm glad that your family has been like accommodating and adapting towards, your goals. And I wanted to talk a little bit about your medication journey and your symptoms because, a lot of what you decide in terms of hobbies and what you do and the pain levels is all dependent on the medication that you take, how your symptoms are doing. So what was your symptom journey like and then the medication journey like?
So my symptoms were gradually getting worse throughout that period, throughout a certain period of time. And then I was first put on naproxen, I believe. It was the medication, and I remember it just caused a lot of stomach pain and like bloating. But at the same time, my symptoms didn't get better. So that was like a failed treatment, and it kind of made me worried even more, especially my parents as well. They started being a bit more concerned, like, how come this one pill can't really change anything? And then I talked with my rheumatologist, and they mentioned like since you failed the naproxen treatment, you should go on and choose a biologic. So that was actually probably one of the scariest moments of my rheumatic disease journey because biologics are like needles. She's mentioned how they change your immune system. So I thought like having an injection alongside something that would kind of modify the composition of my body or in some way was very daunting, but she was very nice and she was very accommodating. She answered all our questions and actually the biologic is what helped me achieve remission.
So you're under remission right now.
I'm not sure if it is like I was in remission a year ago and then it was like 6 to 8 months and then I actually weaned off of the biologic. But then now it flared again. So I restarted the biologic at a higher frequency. And then like sometimes I can still feel it a little bit. Like the other day I was cleaning and then I felt like, bending down and all those actions kind of left a little bit of pain. But I'm hoping that I can reach the point where I don't have to do the injections.
Me too, honestly. I feel like that would be so ideal, but I've been on
Yeah.
medication for so long, probably I think 10 years now, and it's just been like constantly changing. I really hope that I could also reach remission, and I think that's like every patient's dream and goal. What's going through your mind during this time when you're making these decisions?
I think it's a lot of assessing how I feel on the day to day. I think it's still difficult to like localize the pain just as it was. I don't even know how many years ago when I was first diagnosed. So that can be a bit tough because I'm not sure. I start to question like, is my pain because I did this activity or is it because like I truly have arthritis? And then when I was in remission, obviously I was very happy, super, super happy that I didn't have to, do the injections. And then I just remember like the pain slowly creeping up, and I was like, wait, this can't be like my arthritis again. Kind of, I remember like overthinking it a bit at that time. Like, is this arthritis or is this something else? Like, I couldn't tell. But then at one point, like I started feeling the same pain that kind of affected my walking. And when I started like limping to classes and feeling the pain when I was walking through campus, I was like, okay, this is probably my arthritis coming back. And we actually tried a different like oral medication first, but same thing happened. It didn't work. So then we started the biologic again. I was like, okay, starting the cycle again.
That's interesting that you bring up kind of, is this arthritis or something else? I think I have a lot of those questions in my mind when I feel like I have some sort of pain. My blood work's looking great, and then I am like, okay, I still have pain though. Like, is that arthritis? Is that something else? So it's so hard as a patient to like know what that is because not all of us have a medical degree to like make that decision.
Mhm.
And then in addition to that, I feel like we also don't have enough information. Like we're not educated enough to know the difference. And then it's sort of also on our emotions because I'm like, if
Yeah.
I say is that, then the medication will change. And then if that doesn't work, then I'm gonna blame me. Like I'm gonna blame
Mhm.
myself. So it's really hard as a patient to make those decisions. So having some like reassurance or like education about, okay, like you have arthritis, but you can also get like XYZ disease or like this pain. And I think what's really confusing is now like the neurological pain or carpal tunnel or all these other things that you can get with your rheumatic disease. So very interesting. But I think treatment is one of those things that people outside of the chronic illness community don't always understand. It's really kind of a straight line. Has there been anything in terms of medication or treatment that has surprised you over time?
I think it's how rapidly they can change, like a treatment course, and how quickly you have to adjust to kind of keep your arthritis under control. That's something that I experienced before I was on my biologic with the different oral medications, because of course, you want to avoid changing up your immune system and becoming immunocompromised. So I remember my rheumatologist, it wasn't just naproxen, there were like a few other pills, I don't even remember, but it was definitely like changing up quite a bit. And I think obviously the most daunting is the biologic, but if you cross that bridge of the pains or the fear of, the needles and everything, and then you can achieve like something stable within your day-to-day life, it feels a bit better.
Today, you are also involved in inflammatory arthritis research, and you hope to become a clinician scientist. And I'm really fascinated by people who take their lived experience and turn it into something bigger, because I feel like I'm kind of doing that myself. So I'm like, okay, we kind of see eye to eye on a lot of things too. So tell me a little bit on how that interest developed. Like, what made you say, hey, I want to become a clinician scientist?
So in undergrad, I deliberately sought out like a specific rheumatology research position because I knew that I wanted to learn more, not about only my own disease, but just about rheumatic disease in general. And I was also in health sciences, so it kind of fits in with my program. But then I found this one position where it was basic science, so they do a lot of cell work, and my principal investigator had actually worked with a rheumatologist in Toronto, and they like patented like a specific medication or just a novel treatment, and I thought that was like super fascinating. So I wanted to do research with him, and luckily he took me on, and then we're just doing some work in psoriatic arthritis right now actually, but also a lot of AS and then axial spondyloarthritis. Just inflammatory arthritis is his interest in general, and we do like cell work with to find new biomarkers, to find new treatments, just all the basic science research that people typically don't see, I think, behind the scenes.
Has being a patient really influenced the questions that you think researchers should be asking?
That's a good question. I think yes, in one way. I do think that being a patient kind of informs my experience when I'm conducting like different types of research and specifically clinical research. Like sometimes I wonder if researchers should be investigating more so about like the patient experience instead of just like symptoms and like medications. But I do like value the basic science research behind it, but I do know one girl, I went to a conference and she had a presentation on the mental health burdens of juvenile idiopathic arthritis, and she kind of evaluated those outcomes. And I remember having a conversation with her and telling her how like this really resonated with me because a lot of the experiences that the children described were were very reflective of my own. For example, like not being able to do XYZ activity or feeling a bit anxious about a treatment. Like these were all experiences that I think were captured within the research. So I do think that it would be beneficial to have more research regarding the mental health and the patient experience because I think that's a bit it's a bit like the research is lacking a little bit there. There's not too much that's out, but at the same time, the basic science research is still very important.
I totally agree with that. I think mental health is a really big topic, and we need more information and education for patients because it impacts so many aspects of someone's life. So I'm glad that, people that are doing research and hopefully more people will be engaged in that topic. What are your research interests? Like you kind of mentioned you're involved in inflammatory arthritis research. Is there like a certain topic that you want to explore in the future?
I definitely want to look at biomarkers. I think that's something that can really advance the diagnostic process of arthritis, all different types of arthritis, because I know that like you could be like HLA-B27 positive, which is like the biomarker for certain arthritis types, but at the same time, some people aren't. And then in those cases, it can be harder to diagnose the disease. So I think having a biomarker that might be identifiable across like one or two types of arthritis that assert that this patient population like definitely has can be beneficial in terms of like advancing the diagnostic process, making this time shorter, because perhaps doing a blood test can give you the answers instead of having to go through, blood tests, MRI, like all these different types of testings.
I totally agree with you. I think I'm really interested in that as well, especially I think it's important for us to find medication that works based off of our genetic profile because that way we don't have to go through so much trial and error. So I'm glad that, you're interested in research like that and a lot of people are because it'll really make a difference in so many people's lives. You've spent a lot of time supporting and engaging with the rheumatic disease community. Can you tell me a little bit about your most meaningful experience and what brought you back to this work?
First off, I really enjoy like working with this community. I think being like a presence for other people who are going through the same thing can be like reassuring. And the most meaningful moment that I probably experienced in this community was when my Queen's Rheumatic Disease Club, we organized Kingston's first 5K run for pediatric rheumatic diseases. And there was a mom and her daughter who came and she started talking to us and saying like nobody in my daughter's class knows what arthritis is. Like no parents know about it. It was like they talked about their experience being very lonely, just navigating the disease. She also mentioned like, people know things like cancer. They know a lot of other type of chronic diseases, but just arthritis in children is just something that is rarely seen.
Yeah.
So she was quite emotional and she was really happy to have this community to come to and to support her daughter in that way. And I think that was a really special moment because I saw her daughter coloring on the side and like she looked at peace and everything, having a good time. So it was really special. Mhm.
That's amazing. And I think that's so important. Like, especially, I think that's what keeps us going. Like, when patients and parents and so many people come to us and say, hey, like, I didn't know anyone else and you've made such a big impact or what you're doing really resonates with me. And I think a lot of what your work you're doing in this space and also like your career going into the healthcare field is going to be so amazing and it's going to create such a big impact for a lot of people. And especially, I'm glad that, we have so many different organizations working on supporting people with different types of diagnoses at different ages and doing different projects. And that's really important because we want to be able to support this community and help them out. So thanks for the work that you're doing. This year, you were selected as one of our 2026 STEM Without Limits scholarship recipients. So take me back to that moment. Where were you when, you found out that, you got the scholarship and how were you feeling?
So when I received the email, I was actually visiting a friend in BC. It was my first time going. It was sort of like a after exams little trip that I had. But I remember like waking up and then checking my laptop and then seeing the email and I was like, no way, like this is so exciting. I was super happy. And I think having that email on top of like being on that like mini trip was like the best part of my year probably.
Your application was honestly amazing, and I'm just like so excited to share it and your story in so many different ways, which is what we're doing right now, which is through the podcast and then a vlog, so people could really hear what you're up to and we can raise awareness. So I love asking that question because those moments are often years in the making. And when you think about like everything you've gone through since your diagnosis, does receiving a scholarship like this feel different than it might have otherwise?
I think this scholarship, like, it's already rare to find like these types of support for the specific patient community. So I think being a member of this community and receiving the scholarship for my efforts and what I've tried to do for the community is something really special. I think it's definitely different than receiving a scholarship for your academic like accolades and all that, but that's still really important, but I think it's just a different feeling for this one.
Why did you decide to apply for a scholarship? Because I know, like, a lot of people see scholarships out there, but I want to know, like, what was your thought process? Like, what is some advice that you would give to people that are, like, considering maybe applying to a scholarship, ours or another scholarship? And what was your thought process when you, like, saw it and you're like, hey, I'm gonna actually apply and take those steps and bring us through the process of, like, how it worked for you preparing for it and stuff?
I was like actively seeking like scholarships and types of support because this summer I'm doing research at Sick Kids, and it's an unpaid experience, but it also takes up like my week. So I did want to, you know, take this opportunity and do the work for them, but at the same time, like I wouldn't be able to do the typical like 9 to 5 job that I would have in a different summer. So I was looking for scholarships and types of support, and then I came across the Take a Paycheck scholarship, and I remember like thinking, hey, this is like a great opportunity. I'm gonna try my hand at it. And honestly, it was a very introspective process. I think the questions that were asked helped you, reflect on what you've done in the past, reflect on your own experience. And I think that that's actually very meaningful to think back on your own experiences. And I think, as someone who might know their story already, it's always good to share with other people. And I think that this scholarship also provides the opportunity to do that.
Great, and I'm so glad that it worked out for you. What advice do you have for students that will be applying to the scholarship this upcoming cycle?
I would say just be authentic, be genuine about your experience and what you've learned, how you've grown, perhaps. I think, if you're still hesitant about applying, it doesn't hurt to just try. I think you never know unless you give it a shot. And I think, especially if you have a rheumatic disease, like this scholarship, honestly, if you receive it or not, like the scholarship is empowering for youth with rheumatic diseases. And I think if you have an experience that you want to talk about, it's always great to share and get involved in the community because the scholarship also allowed me to, learn more about Take a Paycheck's mission and their work. So I'm trying to be a youth ambassador with them now. So it's just learning the different types of resources that are also available.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I totally agree. I feel like when I was even making the scholarship, so like I was thinking about it because especially in my journey growing up with the rheumatic disease, I found it really frustrating when patients like us have to pay so much money to get adaptive equipment, pay for like extra softwares, ergonomic chairs. Like we have to pay for so many things, whereas like other people don't have to pay for that. So where are the scholarships that are going to help people like us succeed in school? And I think a big thing was also like I'm starting medical school in September, but a big thing is, people telling me that I won't be able to do that because of my rheumatic disease and putting a stop at that. So that's why I made like the STEM without limits because I was like, I want someone who wants to pursue a career in like the science field, like how I wanted to, and I want to be able to provide them with support that could help them pursue that career. So I'm so glad it's given to someone like you because this is exactly what I was looking for. Like I'm looking for someone who has had those challenges and is going to, give back to the community in the medical and scientific field. So thank you for like the work that you do. It's honestly like it's just so interesting because I'm like when I was thinking about this a couple of years ago, like this is I like thought about my experience and I was like I want to help someone else. So I'm so glad that I'm able to help you.
Yeah, thank you so much for like making this opportunity available for the community. It's really helpful.
So one thing I keep thinking about as we've been talking is how different your life might look like today compared to what you imagined when you were first diagnosed. So when you think about the future, what excites you the most?
Thinking back and how much my life has changed with my diagnosis makes me think that, there's probably more changes to come in the next few years. And thinking about the future, I'm just excited for the opportunity to, also pursue a career in medicine while doing research and dedicating my work to the rheumatic disease community. I think that's really exciting. And also, like, the potential opportunity in the future to, have my own projects that I want to investigate and identifying gaps in support that might be present now and perhaps being able to have the resources and the knowledge and the background to actually address them and make the change. That's something that I find really exciting.
If we were to invite you back onto this podcast 10 years from now, what would you hope has changed for yourself and for young people with rheumatic diseases?
I think the first thing would be confidence. I hope that people with rheumatic disease find more confidence in speaking about it because through speaking about it and sharing your stories, we spread awareness and it can be really impactful for the people who might feel a bit more closed off. So the more people we have, speaking about their rheumatic disease or sharing about their story, it's kind of like a chain reaction. And I'm hoping that 10 years from now, there won't be as many misconceptions or assumptions when it comes to arthritis or rheumatic diseases in children.
I'd love to end with this. You and I both know that chronic illness can take a lot from people. Looking back now, is there anything that living with your condition has given you that you don't think you would have developed otherwise?
I think not jumping to conclusions, listening a bit more than assuming, because you never know what somebody might be going through, whether it's arthritis or a chronic illness or something else. I think learning how to give people the space to speak about their own experiences as well and asking questions, being inquisitive about other people can is something that I've kind of learned because before I was also kind of the type of person to ask, to make conclusions by myself. Like I also thought that arthritis was a disease for old people when I first was diagnosed. So I think, my experience has really showed me how important it is to listen to other people talk about their own experiences instead of, coming to a conclusion on your own.
I totally agree with you. I think even for me, not only has it allowed me to kind of like open up and like ask more questions, definitely read more. I feel like I was a person who didn't really take time to read things. I mean, I'm going to medical school now and I'm going to be reading, but I think when I was like 16, I was like, okay, it's my parents' job. It's not my job to learn about my own disease. I think it's made me more independent, more curious, more resilient, and definitely like more confident. I don't think I would have thought that I'd be like talking about my diagnosis online and having conversations like this and inspiring others. So I think we've definitely taken the disease and made something positive out of it, which is so great because I think I was always thinking, oh, I'm going to be sad forever. Like my life is over. And that's not true. And I think we've both kind of shown that it gets better. You just have to kind of adapt and be resilient. So thank you so much for sharing your story so openly today with me, Lisa. I know our listeners are really going to connect with so much of what you shared, and I'm really excited to see where your journey takes you next. For everyone listening, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out Lisa's social media channels and links, which I will put down below, and I'll see everyone next time on Take a Pain Check. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Natasha.